Good afternoon, Frank. It's been
Hello,
a while
Professor.
that we haven't been able to meet, and of course, whenever that happens, a lot goes on in the world that needs some comment.
We have a Jesuit Pope masquerading as a Franciscan, which is very interesting.
And parading humility,
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
changing the way we think about global leaders.
Indeed. Yes. I mean, he really sort of gently lectured the assembled global leaders on Tuesday who were at St. Peter's.
Yeah, did he say anything significant to them?
Well, basically saying, get down off your high horses and you have to work for the betterment of mankind. Angela Merkel was there, Vice President Biden was there, a number of other people were there.
Oh, Angela Merkel was there.
Yeah, she was there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly a different image of leadership from compared to previous popes, let alone other heads of state.
Yes,
Since he's both.
indeed.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, since everybody is looking for a chink in which to insert their wedge in order to try to get some attention to the way that they think that the Catholic world should be reformed. Atlantic has an article today about the necessity to have female Catholic priests by somebody who apparently used to be a male priest in the Catholic Church and lost his job and was excommunicated for saying so.
Oh, okay. I'll check that. All right.
So I think things are going to start revving up, and he's going to have to work out how to deal with them. And it's going to be very interesting to see what sort of style he develops and deals with them.
Well, he already, I believe, made a statement about the appropriateness of civil unions for non-heterosexuals, which was actually flabbergasting compared to his predecessor.
Yes.
And then, in addition to that, obviously his entire style, as you mentioned, I mean, many times, at least with the church, it seems style is about 90% of it.
Well, it certainly is, but but that's a really clever idea. The idea that anybody can have partnerships that they want. We just we don't have to call them all the same thing.
Right. So
because they're sealed in different ways. And I wonder, it'd be interesting to see. I saw that in I think that was that in the New York Times this morning.
I think it was a number of papers had it.
But not without very much comment.
Right.
It's going to be interesting to see what's made of that, and that may be the beginning of a solution to all the problems.
It could be. It could be.
Which is the sort of solution that other popes would have agreed to, and even C.S. Lewis would have agreed to in the 1950s.
Yeah. That's right.
But they didn't have the idea about how to do it. So it's very clever.
Well, he just gently suggested it, and I guess there had been some precedent back when he was in Argentina as well, when he was the Cardinal of Buenos Aires. So it was not out of character for him. So I think it's going to be an interesting time. So how did you spend last Thursday again, if I may ask?
We had an international conference here at Penn on the global food crisis that we foresee because there was general complacency about food in the world after the Green Revolution in the 70s. All of a sudden we had plenty of food. And everything was pretty much okay until about 5 years ago, when the price of food started rising, and people realized that soon we were going to have 7 or 8 billion people living in cities, and hardly anybody left in the countryside to produce the food for them. And maybe that's the reason that the price of food was already beginning to rise. And then there's all sorts of other things going along with this. One is that more and more poor people who couldn't afford meat but wanted to eat meat are beginning to make enough money to want meat. And so the demand for meat is increasing, and meat is the environmentally most
destructive
meat food to produce. Of course, at the other end of the scale, more and more people, though a much smaller number of people, are getting so rich that they have time to think about their health,
Hmm.
They're not eating as much meat.
Yes, it's a strange.
They want organic food,
Right,
and
right.
that's much more expensive to produce than the sorts of food that most people have to eat that they get in
It's
supermarkets. So the whole food situation is changing.
it's an interesting point because there was an article Tuesday, I think, in the Wall Street Journal about how because of the rising price of commodities now, food commodities, hedge funds in particular are beginning to pour money into investments in agricultural lands in the United
Yes,
States.
yes.
And it's a
It,
golden opportunity.
the whole everything that has to do with food production is beginning to change and changing in interesting ways, and there's no comment on it in the media that puts it all together so far. Um, the um, the other thing is that the we weren't able to get big food corporations represented at this conference, unfortunately, except Bunge, I think, is the name of one, which I didn't know about, who was there, who
I
had
don't know them.
something to say, but we didn't get people like Walmart and others that do the retail side of things. But the big food problem in the past has been supply, not production.
Mm-hmm.
Ever since Amartya Sen got his Nobel Prize in the 1970s for explaining to us that all famines that we had put down to food production were in fact a problem of supply, um, in recent history at any rate. And it's supply that is going to be the problem probably in cities. That is, you know, the larger the number of people that live together, especially in slums, the bigger the problem of getting food to them.
Sure. I mean, logistically alone, it's a super challenge.
Uh,
And I believe last year we spoke about a study in Britain put out by Chatham House that indicated that in the event of a lorry strike, a truck strike, for a 3-day lorry strike would mean that the supermarkets would be bare.
mhm.
And then if it goes into the 5th or 6th day, people will begin to be running out of food at their homes. It's that close to an in-time inventory, largely also, of course, due to the perishability of the food, but also simply because of the economics of holding it. So I would imagine if you're talking about one of those mega cities in Africa or in Asia or in Latin America, where there perhaps is not necessarily the similar infrastructure that might exist around London, that problem is only exacerbated.
So at the moment, it's really amazing. If you go to a city like Bangkok or Karachi, which are
Mm-hmm.
enormous cities, there's absolutely no food problem. There's food everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very difficult to see how it gets there.
Mm-hmm. How
Uh,
does it get there?
well, I think it has a lot to do with the social structure. That is,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people who will do a lot of work for very little money. And I don't know whether that's going to continue in exactly the same way. So um, an enormous number of people are employed in the business of getting different items of food where they ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
If you and I go to the supermarket, most of us don't pay any attention to where the food comes from that we buy, but it comes from all over the world.
It does. It
Whether
does.
it's fresh fish, or supposedly fresh fish, or vegetables,
Mm-hmm.
fruit.
Right.
It's absolutely amazing the degree to which some of us, I'd like to know what proportion of us, are being supplied globally of the things that we're interested in buying.
Mm-hmm.
Though, of course, for a lot of people, they're still being supplied locally.
Mm-hmm.
But presumably, this is the sort of thing that's going to change, that as the population continues to increase, though it's increasing not so fast as it used to be, but the number of people living in cities is increasing faster. That means that it's going to be more and more difficult for people to be supplied locally.
Mm-hmm.
But also, more and more people are moving from city to city. So even the population in the cities is mobile.
Right. Well, let me ask you a question. All right. I mean, you have people who run these large companies. All right. You just take it for example. People, for example, at Microsoft and Apple, they sit down and they figure out what the consumer is going to want a couple of years down the road. If you run an oil company, you begin to try to figure out, what the rate of the hybrid conversions are going to be, the pickup amongst the consumers, and how high can you pump up the gas mileage in order to keep people on carbon-based vehicles so you can continue to sell more of your product. If you're the head of a General Mills or somebody like that, or even a little bit further down the food chain, a Tesco's or a ShopRite or a giant supermarket or a Whole Foods, I mean, did you get the sense in the conference, even though you said that none of the food producers or food companies were there? I mean, are they looking ahead? Do they see this? I mean, because this is like right around the corner, calendar-wise.
Well, our impression generally, both in the preparation for the conference and in listening to people at the conference, even though there were a lot of people from the UN there, from FAO and Habitat and places like that, that even though there were some people who were aware that there was a crisis looming, nobody had any idea what they were going to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people who have interesting ideas about how to look after a particular corner of the problem, like how to produce more meat more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing that looks at the whole problem generally. And part of the problem, of course, is that we don't know the global system.
Mm-hmm.
And even the big food markets know the global system insofar as it's it's relevant to what they want to buy.
Right.
But that's all.
Right.
And
it's not like oil. It's not like oil.
No.
Yeah.
And we live in a situation in which the majority of the whole population of the world has been existing on the same staple food for thousands of years and eating basically the same thing day in, day out all their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Only a small proportion at the top of the social scale in various parts of the world have been more experimental and more demanding. And all these things are changing. And we saw what happened with the potato famine in Ireland in the middle of the 19th century. It would be so easy for something to happen like that for one of the major staples that we depend upon now.
Mm-hmm.
And all this has to be taken account of. I think, one of the things that I was arguing at the conference was that our whole attitude towards food production is going to have to change. Whole attitude towards food processing, and we're going to have to make a distinction in the way we think about things between organizing the ideal nutrition for the whole
Mm-hmm.
population.
Mm-hmm.
And a related problem, but a different problem, is how to deal with the variation in food demand. And we had one keynote speech which gave us the absolute answer to all our problems. And that was, what do we have to do? We just have to eat insects.
Eat insects.
Yeah.
Well,
the biomass of insects on the global scale is more than enough than we need, more than what we need. And if we just be more constructive about insects and stop thinking about cows.
I'm thinking a little bit of Papillon at Devil's Island now.
Well, I once drove through a cloud of locusts.
Oh my!
Which was quite a terrifying experience because they got into everything.
Yeah.
And then in the evening, I found people roasting them and having a wonderful time.
But wouldn't a substantial increase in the eating of insects disrupt the chain of the natural environment somewhere? Aren't they food products for another food or animal group in I don't know, in the chain?
And there are so many different insects, so many species doing all sorts of different things and running their own societies. Yes. Very socially sophisticated societies.
They are. I mean, you've seen those ant farms, I'm
run empires with colonies and field administrations.
Yes.
Ants running aphid colonies.
Yes.
That I think we could probably deal with it.
Really? That's a very, I mean, well, again, there's two things that you pointed out. I know we're running out of time, but if I was running one of these big food companies, I would, again, not to betray my socialistic tendencies, but I'll take the other side of it for a minute. I mean, I would look at this as a possible opportunity. I mean, you're going to have more and
Yeah.
more people who need to eat,
Mm.
and if my product was feeding them, then I would be beginning to look for ways to solve this. The other thing that strikes me is when you pointed out to restructuring the global appetite trends. I mean, it's true. I mean, everybody knows this is true, but you can eat a certain amount of soybeans and get the exact same, if not more so, nutrition and protein than you could from eating the similar amount of meat.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas over the pound of meat that you eat, or the half pound of meat that you eat, might require some 20 pounds of alfalfa and hay and everything else to produce.
And an enormous amount of water as well.
That's correct. Whereas the soybeans just grow from the ground. So, as you noted, the people economically at the top of the scale are beginning to eat the soybeans, while the people below that are like, oh, it is now it's our turn to eat meat. And
Now we're going to work out how to put together a university-wide course on the looming food crisis.
mm-hmm.
We've got people in the veterinary science school working on meat production, people in design, people in the Wharton School of Business, and in half a dozen different areas,
Mm-hmm.
medical and so on, all coming together to tell the story of food production, supply, and nutrition, as it is on the current point on the world history trajectory and where it's leading to. And designing that course over the next week or so.
Again, there was one other parallel that I see. Of course, that was after the Black Death went through Europe. I mean, food production just plummeted, right? Because there was nobody in the land to till it, and fortunately, the population also plummeted at the same time. But they did have incidents of starvation, I believe, in medieval Europe because the lack of agricultural production as well as delivery.
Yeah.
During that. Oh, this has been fascinating. Well, all right. And we didn't even get to Syria and Obama and Israel or anything else.
It'll still be there next week.
Yeah, but most likely it will. All right. All right. Well, thank you very much, Professor.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.